Good evening. I want to take this time to welcome everyone to the Board of Directors agenda, City of Little Rock Board of Directors agenda meeting for February 22nd, 2022. This is our opportunity to review the agenda for our formal board meeting that will be held on March 1st, 2022. Before we get started, I want to take this time to recognize City Director Cappy Peck. This is her birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm 69, y'all. 69.
Young.
On 2/22/2022 on Tuesday. So, just saying. 2/2.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
We're grateful for you and just so happy to celebrate you today.
Thank you.
All right, we'll start with our Targeted Community Development Committee update. I believe Ms. Kimberly Enoch is who's the chairperson.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Kimberly.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my video. Hopefully you guys can see this. Thank you so much for having us here today. It is with great pleasure. So on behalf of our Honorable Mayor, Frank Scott Jr., and our city directors and city manager, and city residents like you and me, thank you so much for having me to talk about this Targeted Community Development Initiative, our Little Rock Resolution 15382, and building up on our most neglected wards in our city of Little Rock to make sure that we are addressing our systematic barriers that are hindering generational wealth and economic mobility. And in these wards, which is Ward 1, South End, and then you have the 12th Street corridor and southwest portion of Ward 2, and then you have Ward 6, which is the John Barrow Road corridor, and then Ward 7, Southwest Little Rock. And our directors in these target areas are Virgil Miller, Ken Richardson, Doris Wright, and BJ Wyrick. And we want to thank them for their leadership and getting this resolution to where we are today. And so just a quick update, this resolution was created so we could strive to make plans in these, like I say, most neglected wards in our city. And we want to improve the overall living conditions, that including the housing, including those evidence-based programs, also making sure that we're helping our small businesses so that they can continue to increase generational wealth, but then also policy making so that way we're making enhancements that are future as well. So just quickly looking at the map, we wanted to give you a highlight using this key. Southwest Little Rock is here in the lavender. You have John Barrow here in the green. And then this 12th Street corridor here, which is this orange color. And then kind of a dark teal is the South End part of Little Rock. And these are our targeted 4 wards that we are here to come up as a group of 7 members that have all hand selected and board members that are representing all 4 wards, either working as well as living in those wards. And this 7-member team was created so we could identify and help come together with a targeted plan that would be a strategic plan that we could use as a resolution to underscore what's happening in these wards. And quickly here, the committee members, which again consist of our 7-member task force, which is myself as chair. We have Adam Fogelman, which should be on as well to help with any questions and finalize the presentation. We have Dr. Nika Whitfield representing Ward 1, Director BJ Wyrick representing Ward 7, Tamara Farisa representing Ward 6, Robert Webb, an at-large member, and Tara Bruce. And we couldn't do any of this without our liaisons, which includes Dr. Deion Jackson, Kevin Howard, Johnny Honeywell, Gilbert Collins, and Director Doris Wright. And as of all of those people named, we have been busy meeting. We've had a lot of meetings and a lot of action items. Here you can see we've had meetings in August, September, October, November, January, and February. And as we noted before, we elected our leadership, and then we started discussing what's the best way to organize our committee. So we discussed an idea grid, which is just a grid that is going to help us to make sure that we're organizing our thoughts and ourselves, as well as when we receive feedback, we'll be able to advance these ideas so we meet those goals. We also had a ward listening tour where we were planning to go to all 4 wards by February 2022, but due to COVID, there was only one listening tour, and that was in Ward 6, where Director Wright led us on a tour of the ward, and that was December the 9th. We also participated with the Office of Diversity and Equity Inclusion. The Little Rock Equity Labs were for Ward 2 in November, Ward 7 in December, and also Ward 6 in December as well. And so we also encouraged each one of our committee members to personally tour these targeted wards and make sure that if we are addressing the issues, we know about them, but we're also including the input of the community members and the city staff as well. So we've also reviewed identified projects from housing and public works. So we've been busy within this time. Again, the organizational grid is just a way that we could list those categories that were in the resolution, which all kind of overlap, but we identified 6: hunger, health, economic development, housing, infrastructure, and programs. And as we know, programs may overlap multiple of those categories, but it's going to require a strong presence and programmatic response. And as we mentioned, those proposals and recommendations that we plan to provide will be broken down into short, medium, and long-term efforts. And again, just quickly, short-term would be those addressing immediate needs. The medium would be anything from 6 months to 5 years. And then again, long-term would those be permanent changes that we can continue to strive for. Here's a picture of just the grid itself, where we've identified each of those 6 categories, and we're able to address short, medium, and long-term goals. And as we do our tours, as we receive feedback, we'll be able to enter this information and categorize it by also ranking the most important items. And here we have a survey that has been developed by the task force with the help of the City Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And this survey has been released so we can gather information from these wards. And if you take your phone out now, you can actually snap a photo of this QR code and the survey will come up. And we're trying to make sure that we get feedback from our wards on what's their key issues? How can we develop programs that build their communities, especially for those who live in those communities? The survey is out now and has launched. It closes March 7th. So make sure you take a photo and get that survey started. It is very important that we get buy-in and input because we have exciting news. $1 million has been invested in those targeted wards, which equates to about $250,000 for each ward. So we want to get feedback so we can help invest in those long neglected areas here in Little Rock. And so with that, if Adam is on, we'll buzz him in, but if not, I'll just continue. Our next steps here are just that we want to continue information gathering. That's from our
Kimberly,
community.
I am here.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Adam. Please take over. Adam Fogelman is our chair.
I certainly don't want to interrupt, but I'll apologize. I'm having some technical difficulties on my end, so the video is not showing up. But can you all hear me well?
Yes, sir. We can hear you well.
Okay. So first, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Board. I want to compliment the city staff who's working hand in hand with the committee to identify ways that we can move these communities forward. And also want to praise Kimberly for her diligence and leadership. This committee, I don't think we'd be where we are today without her leadership. The Targeted Community Development Initiative, by its very nature, is a long-term commitment. We are beginning and continuing to gather information. And first and foremost, that information has to come from the residents themselves. We are also reaching out to stakeholders like churches and nonprofits that are engaged in service in these communities. And as Kimberly mentioned, a survey has been prepared. It is being released and distributed through the neighborhood associations, community centers, resource centers, through the Little Rock webpage, and hopefully by y'all. Send it to any of your constituents, and we'd love to hear from them. We're seeking basic information from residents to identify what their aspirations are for their own community. The listening tours will continue. They are open to all residents, and I want to reinforce that. We want to hear directly from the people that live and work and serve in those communities. So as those are scheduled, we certainly want to hear and visit with everybody in a COVID-safe manner, of course. With respect, we're also seeking proposals from the city's own departments. I think particularly planning, public works, and housing and neighborhood programs will necessarily lead the way, but the city's departments work across borders, so to speak. The Treasury Department works to collect city maintenance liens. And so if there are proposals that can be received from any department that impacts these targeted communities, we are open. We want to know about them, and if we're all in agreement that these are good ideas, we would hope to be able to recommend these programs to the board for resources so that monies can be appropriated and that we can move them forward. Additionally, we'd hope to see through these programs, these proposals from the city's departments, designs to increase communication with the community, and also to provide training in areas that are related to the goals of targeted community development. I have ideas. I don't want to share those just yet. I want those to come from the board. But I know that there are ideas galore within the city departments. And I think it was last week, y'all made permanent the entry to work program, which is a great opportunity to lift people up. And whether it's in the south end of Ward 1 or in Soma of Ward 1 or anywhere else in the city, it's a laudable purpose and a laudable goal. And that's the type of proposal that we're seeking and we would like to pursue with the city's support. Kimberly, if you'll skip to the next, I think the recommendations, so the first round of recommendations that we would make first and foremost, we would ask that the city, the board of directors commit and encourage the departments and the staff to seek out available grant funding, whether it's through nonprofits or foundations or through available federal monies. Targeted community development will take resources, and it's only appropriate that we leverage the city's resources as much as possible so that we're not spending dollar for dollar city dollars, that we bring in additional money from outside places so that we can have a multiplier effect. Second, we would recommend that we use existing resources more fully. The example that was discussed just the other night with the Targeted Community Development Committee was that while there is available space in each community through community centers and resource centers to host programs, there aren't allocations or appropriations of funds to put on programs in those spaces absent some grant-funded endeavors. Next, and this is probably, I believe, the most directly on point to begin the process toward community development and redevelopment and revitalization, we would ask the city to release a request for proposal to seek out a master plan consultant. And once responses are received and a qualified respondent is selected, that then the city hire and put that consulting firm to work in the targeted wards. And that work, what we envision is to work with the community residents to help to cast a vision for what the future looks like. And then on the back end, because where I started, this is a long-term commitment of the city. We would like to come in and work off of those recommendations to ensure that that zoning reforms are made where appropriate and where necessary, and other policies are adopted that would encourage the pursuit of that laudable goal. And finally, we would ask for resources to assist in identification of American Recovery Plan funds or infrastructure funds or any other federal dollars that are currently available that may be put to work to achieve the purposes of the Targeted Community Development Initiative. And I think that wraps it up for me, but we are certainly open to answer whatever questions you may have.
Thank you, Adam. We just wanted to say a big thanks to our mayor and our city board for bringing these opportunities so we can improve our quality of life within our wards that we live in. And so now we'll open it up for questions and answers.
Kimberly, I just want to take this time to share appreciation to you and Mr. Fogelman for the presentation, the time well spent.
All right,
That's just
I want to thank you all. We will have another update around April and bring more recommendations from our task force. And we want to thank you all. I see Director Wright and Director Wyrick. Thank you so much for participating and being involved in our meetings and engaged. And with that, that is the end of our presentation.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Again, we just want to share our appreciation to Directors Wright and Wyrick, who are serving on the actual committee. I believe just Director Wyrick, I'm sorry. But I know Director Wright is heavily involved as well, and just want to share that appreciation. Seeing no questions, I know you guys are doing a lot of great work, and we look forward to the next update. We're glad that we were able to fund the first investment of a $5 million a year investment over the next 5 years, which is our goal, but we're able to fund the first investment with $1 million at the end of last year, and hope as we identify available funds to do more. So thank you so much. I know you all are working on how to actually provide some recommendations as we move forward. Thank you so much. All right, we'll now transition. Board members, are there any questions for items 1 through 6?
Let me, Mayor,
Yes.
this question. I have learned to read more, and I'm reading board communications and fiscal impact of some of these programs and these resolutions, and I want to make sure when I look at this and I read about an amount that's being appropriated, say in the first resolution, we're talking about the 2022 budget, right? Am I right to make that assumption on most of these? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when and of course, I read all these, and when I looked at the resolution 5, I have just a question about that as far as the fiscal impact is concerned. Just to make sure I understand this, the original amount to fund this came from American Rescue plan money. Is that correct? This might be a question for the city manager or for the finance department because it came from them. But the additional $417,000 appears to be coming from another source of funds.
We'll have Director Linehan. Director Linehan.
Yes, I'm here. Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let me pull this up. Director Miller, you are correct that $821,000 of the funding for this came from an allocation of American Rescue Plan dollars. The remaining $417,000 is coming from a 3/8 cent project for IT capital improvements. And this is associated with the city's enterprise resource planning system. It's upgrades that are needed in order for both the planning upgrade and the procurement upgrades to all work cohesively together.
So the $417,000 is from the 2022 budget?
No, sir, it's coming from the 3/8 cent sales tax allocation for IT projects that are unexpended. So this is the tax that expired in December 2021, but there are funds remaining for IT improvements, and this is an allocation from that funding source.
So can we get or maybe everyone knows this except for me, is there some report that shows how much of the 3/8 cent sales tax has not been, I guess, allocated yet? Because it's 417 was money that hadn't been allocated or was allocated and it's just not.
It was allocated to IT projects, information technology projects, but not specifically to each individual project within that category. But as we've discussed before with the 3/8 cent sales tax, since that is a sales tax, we don't even have our December sales tax receipts in-house yet. That will be received later this month. Funds have to be accumulated before they can be expended. And so there were certain projects that were advanced early on with short-term financing to get them kicked off before all of the sales tax funds were collected. Others had to wait till funds were accumulated. And so while the funding stopped December 31st, and we'll receive our allocation of what the state collected through December 31st at the end of this month, there'll be no more revenue coming in. But there are several projects, there are infrastructure projects and many other things that will continue to be expended with those funds that have been accumulated. And they're all allocated, they're all dedicated. And there is an LR Cent report. In fact, we have a quarterly report tomorrow at noon with our LR Cent committee. And so we can provide that spreadsheet that itemizes the projects and the revenue allocated to date and the expenditures allocated to date, but it would probably be more useful if we wait till that final sales tax allocation comes in and is fully allocated by the end of the month.
Okay, so that report will probably answer questions maybe that came to me when I read the fiscal impact. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And one other thing on towards the resolution 6, the way it was written up and the way I read it on the write-up, the last paragraph of this write-up talked about these were funds in the 2022 budget. Couldn't that be said for most of these resolutions?
Well, not all. Not only the operating expenditures of the general fund, the street fund, the waste disposal fund, fleet fund, vehicle storage, and parking garage funds are budgeted. The capital sources of funds that are already dedicated by bond issue, like the street and drainage bonds, those are not budgeted as operating sources of revenue. They're not part of the 2022 budget. In this particular case, this is the outside allocation for the Little Rock Downtown Partnership, and it was a line item allocation in the 2022 budget coming from the general fund.
Okay. All right, thank you. Just trying to, I'm gonna get up to speed on this budget and how these funds are allocated like that. It gets real specific, and I appreciate the information as it relates to, board communication and those different categories there. It's quite detailed when it goes down to, account number and where it's coming from. It's so specific. I was almost looking for the category that it was coming from. So maybe I can get together with the city manager and try to figure out when it's making reference to it. Obviously, you want us to read where this is coming from. I probably need to know a bigger picture of where these funds are coming from, because it's so specific. It gets down to the specific account number.
And Director Miller, one of the things I often say is I love to have a new set of eyes on things. And I think that's a great point. We did mention the account number, but we didn't say in the fiscal impact, this was approved as part of the 22 general fund budget. And so I understand exactly what you're alluding to, and we can add that.
Okay, that's perfect. That's exactly what I was trying to get to. So thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Director Adcock?
Yes, I have a question on item number 6. I would like that broken down into each one of these categories and how much each category is taking of this $195,000. Just so I have it by next week, please.
Yes, ma'am. Would you just like that via email?
Email would be fine.
We'll get that sent out to you and the entire board.
Thank you. I also have a question on 8 and 9.
Before we go to 8 and 9, just so we can stay in order, Director Adcock, we have Vice Mayor Hines. Do you have any questions from 1 through 6?
No, I'm on to 7. I'm sorry. I was just getting my hand up for the separate items.
Sure. So we'll go to Director Adcock for 8 and 9, then come back to Vice Mayor Hines for number 7.
Okay, on item number 8, can you tell me which community school this is going to be funded at?
Is Dr. Barth on? Or
He's not. This is our Wingate. And let me see that. You all already approved this, but because of COVID, remember, this is the one, there's really no city money. They did a presentation to CYF. Because of COVID delays and things, the city attorney's office opined that we needed to just tweak this to make it more in line with how the monies will be expended. I don't know if it says on the board committee. It doesn't say which school, but we'll provide that.
By next week, I would like to know which school is going to be at and how the students are selected for this program and how many students are going to be selected for this program.
we'll get that to you via email as well.
And then on number 9, since this involves taxes and everything, I've had 2 calls from individuals wanting to know if this was the city doing any tax, and I know it is the library. So I would like for someone to explain this so that they're not thinking that we're doing something up here about a tax at this meeting.
City Attorney, if you don't mind.
Director Adcock, the Arkansas Constitution has the special provision that allows a millage to be issued for operating or capital funds for municipal libraries. This election is to actually modify downward the millage that they've got approved here. And so then they'll go ahead and issue the bonds for their various projects. But they have to have an election to do that because the last election authorized the millage.
I think the question, Mr. Carpenter, is this raising anyone's millage, or is this making a lesser millage?
I'm sorry,
It lowers it.
it lowers the overall millage rate.
Okay, thank you, that's what I needed for you to say. Thank you, Mayor, that's all that I have.
Vice Mayor Hines?
Thank you. This is on 7. This is probably a question for Tom and Bruce. So I see a request here to stress test and evaluate the Fireman's Relief and Pension Fund. I'm assuming this is the closed fund. I have a request out to you, Tom, for an opinion on whether or not we followed our own ordinance where the police closed pension fund is. And so I'd like an update, Bruce, from you on where we're at, since I think you sit on that pension board. And then, Tom, I want to know where the opinion is on this. And I'll be supportive of this, but it seems like we're doing one and not the other. And I've got some folks who are very interested that are still in that police closed fund.
Vice Mayor, I believe, I don't know if he did an opinion, but I know he did a memo or an email when this first came up after former Mayor Stola had written a letter to you all. This is moving forward with the commitment with the Fireman's Relief and Pension Fund, and one of the commitments that I made to him is that we would make this retroactive if Mr. Carrero determines that we can't afford an increase, then we would make that retroactive to January the 1st of this year. I'll let Tom explain on the police side.
In terms of the opinion, I mentioned to you that there was a question as to whether this type of analysis is appropriate, and the answer to that one was pretty easy, yes. One of the things that I'm trying to finish up is there's some variation as to how often and when we're going to look at this, so we need to probably try to clean that up at the same time. The initial resolution said we would review this every 3 years, and we're a little bit off kilter, and that's what I'm trying to finalize.
Okay, thank you. And one other item, kind of segueing back to what Director Miller talked about, if we can have a request, I guess we probably ought to wait till we get our December sales tax proceeds, but I'd like a roll-up of all of our allocated and unspent 3/8 cent projects, and then any extra 3/8 cent that's unspent and unallocated. There's 2 different buckets there I think we need to consider as those proceeds roll in. I know we've got some projects in resurfacing in my ward that were bid late, and they still, I guess they'll do them this spring, but their carryover from resurfacing was supposed to be accomplished. So Bruce and Sarah, if you guys could do that, and I'm willing to wait until we get our finalized sales tax, but I'd definitely like to see how the buckets of allocated and unspent funds, and then any unallocated unspent funds that are going to be left over after we do the final tally of the proceeds from December on the 3/8 cent.
Director Wyatt?
Thank you, Mayor. I wonder if we could get a copy of the CENT report, the CENT quarterly report. I would like to see that. I also would like a tally at the end of the sales tax window to see how much money is left, that allocation that's left. And I wanted to follow up and ask this question on number 9, just a little bit different. We received a email from a constituent that thought that we were going to keep the 1.8 mills and add the 1.3 mills, but we actually are reducing from 1.8 to 1.3. I wanted to make sure that that was the right answer.
Yes.
Okay, That's good. Thank you very much.
Director Wright?
Thank you, Mayor. My request is for the city manager to provide a Sense Committee report on the Barrow Road streetscape, which was a part of the 2011 projects that were supposed to be done. That project has not been finished, and there was a allocation for that, and I want to know when that project will be done. It called for 3 additional sections, and I do recall at the community meeting that took place last year that they elected not to do Labette, but did list in there the area in front of McMath and the Canis and Barrow intersection. So I want to know when those will be done and how much money is available. Remaining, if I recall, it's supposed to be over $500,000 remaining.
I think that's correct. And I believe, because you'd asked about some resurfacing, that Lori is working on getting a Zoom meeting with yourself, Mr. Honeywell, and me to kind of talk about that project and how we move it forward. So that should be coming up soon.
But I want to be clear that that area of Barrow, that section was never resurfaced as a part of the other resurfacing because of the streetscape component that was supposed to be done. So that area needs to be resurfaced.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Director Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. So we're talking about reports. It's nothing to do with what's on the agenda, but I recall city manager had given us, and Director Linehan had given us an update on the ARPA funds, and it was like $900,000 that was not allocated yet. And I want to make sure, is that still the case at this point?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you. Is there any timetable for the allocation of those funds that hadn't been?
There is. We're going to come forward fairly soon. I think we get the second round in May. So we'll combine the $900,000 with the second round and kind of talk through that with the board.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had, Mayor.
Director Wright, is your hand still up?
It's up again, Mayor. I wanted to bring forward a question that I had posed previously on behalf of the Age-Friendly Little Rock Commission. They had posed a question to me and my fellow colleagues regarding funding from the CARES Act or the American Rescue Plan funds that could be made available to address the needs of our seniors in the city. And I never got a response for that. And since we have that $900,000 unallocated, I would like to request that some of those funds be used to address the needs of our seniors.
And Director, that will be sort of part of our discussion moving forward. Right now, the final rules have come out, and it's a very large document that our grant staff and our staff and executive administration are going through. So once we have that complete and we know what we can and can't do, we plan on bringing all that forward, and that's a pending request that's on the list.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that if those funds cannot be used, that we do not forget that that commission needs to be funded with some resources from somewhere.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions from items 1 through 9, Mr. Moore, if you would begin our work session for a potential renewal of the 2012 millage, 3 mills.
Thank you, Mayor, and members of the board. As I mentioned on February 8th, I think it's very important that we get the city board's input into how we craft a potential proposal to send to the voters. So what we wanted to do today, we have sort of a worksheet, and you can have more than one bullet. We just started with one, but to sort of go around the room, and I just did it by ward order, and let's just take down some of your ideas as far as, and again, remember, this can only be used for capital. You no longer can buy police cars because it has to be for the life of the close to the life of the bond. So you probably can could buy some fire trucks, but IT, things like that, we're no longer able to fund. So with that, Director Miller, and we can pull up the presentation if we need to, if there's any questions from February 8th, but we just wanted to, and my thought is then we'll go back and begin to put some numbers around these proposals. As we talked about, we typically do a 15-year bond issue. We can do longer, we can do 20, we can do 25. We always pay these off early because of the way the bond laws are structured in Arkansas, where you're not able to factor in property tax increases. So they're pretty much frozen at the time you issue the bonds. So that's why but as property tax grows, we go ahead and pay our allocation, and that's why we typically pay them off early. With that, if there's no questions, I'd like to just, again, get some of you all's ideas about what you would potentially like to see in a referral. Director Miller?
Well, I want to make sure I understand. This is for capital projects, right?
Correct.
I had the city give me a list of capital projects. Well, I guess it would be, this is not to be confused with streets and drainage.
Now, if you remember, let's go back to the February presentation real quick, and I'll just give you just some examples again of what we did the last two. Let's start on page 3. So in 2003, you can see we did fire department improvement bond, so of $12 million. So we built fire station. We did some police improvement bonds. This is where we actually purchased we've sold it now, but that kiosk that was on Capitol. That's how we paid for that. And then one of the biggest projects was the third question was we pretty much had an overhaul of our 911 system, new towers, new radios. Then we did street improvements as the fourth question. Fifth question was drainage improvements. And again, we hired bond counsel, which we will bring forward at our next meeting, and they help us once the board sort of decides on what we would like to send to the voters. They help us put together the ordinances and working with the city attorney's office. We did park and rec improvements. So all of these are capital. One example, and this wasn't what we did in 2003, but this is how we built the Southwest Community Center back, I guess it was in the 90s, through this same millage. So then just flip over, and again, you can see we did animals. So we did some improvements at the Animal Village. We actually spent $1.1 million with Robinson. So that was 2003, 2004. In 2012, on page 7, we had just passed the sales tax election in 2011. So the board, we didn't need to do the parks and do other types of improvements because we had passed the 2011 sales tax. So the board made the conscious decision that we were just going to do streets and drainage. And And you still had to have two separate ballot issues, ballot questions, because Tom has opined sometimes that for street improvements, we might actually have to pay somebody for some property. So that's why they're separate like that. So there's no limit on the number of ballot questions that a city, a municipality can have. I think I saw recently in Conway, there were going to be 5 questions, but a city up in Northwest Arkansas had like 12. Again, you have to, if you divide it up, I mean, you have to have separate, it's actually a separate vote for each item.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I've heard the most about, and you tell me if this fits or not, it's the South End Park, just south of Whitmore Circle. And of course, when it rains, it floods there, and it's got bad drainage there. And can funds be used to try to address that, these funds?
It could, is it eligible? It is. It's just in a floodplain. And it is very, I mean, we've dealt with this for years, and we tried to do some work out there as much as we can, but it's gonna flood. I mean, and I don't think, I can't imagine how many millions of, well, first of all, it's hard, it's almost not allowed to build in the floodplain because it's supposed to help with the drainage when flooding happens. So, I mean, we can put it down, we can review it, but it probably would be a very high bar to be able to try to do something that prevents it from flooding because it's literally in a floodplain.
So when we built that park years and years ago, it was in a floodplain?
Correct, and you can, and again, the flood maps change, and I don't know when that park was developed and when it became part of the floodplain, but those change probably every 10 years almost, as far as when the federal government designates a land that's now in the floodplain. It happens out in West Little Rock. The vice mayor has been involved with that over the years when FEMA comes in and says, oh, well, we had so many issues here, we need to put this either in the floodway or the floodplain.
Okay, thanks. Well, one of the other things I've heard specifically from the East Little Rock neighborhood group, excuse me, is proposing a street to go to East Little Rock. I guess, I don't know if it's been labeled as East Village or could these funds be used for something like that?
It could.
Okay.
So Emily, this is, yeah, you got it. This sort of goes to the, well, Director Pierce and I have been dealing with this for many years, and it's going to take a lot of money, but it can be used.
All right, well, I'm just, I mean, this presentation was made before I got on this board back in February, so I'm thinking out loud here, and you guys have to reel me back in. I've heard people talk about the benefits of having a shot tracker. I don't know is that a benefit? Is that a bad thing? I mean, what, people seem to want it and some other people don't. Is that something that?
It would not be eligible for this type of funding. It's called Shot Spotter, and we implemented it probably about 4 years ago in certain part of the city. And it's another tool for the police if someone isn't calling, or doesn't call 911 for whatever reason, they're able to track down where these shots might have happened, and mainly they go out and get casings and try to match those up.
Okay.
But Shot Spotter would not be eligible for this.
Okay. I don't even know if that's a benefit or not. Some people seem to think it is. Some neighborhoods seem to want one and some don't. So I really don't know. You have to educate me about the benefits of that. And then there's some areas that need some infrastructure improvements in Ward 1 as far as, you know, the water pipes and some of those infrastructure deals. And I don't know the line that's drawn between Central Arkansas Water and then what we as a city do, because you think in Ward 1 that all infrastructure's in place, but there are some parts of Ward 1 that, you know, there is either deferred maintenance where you don't have enough infrastructure to have good water pressure, and those are some things that these funds could be used for, something like that. Or
I mean, water pressure would be a CAW issue, but, and I believe we'll hear this throughout this evening, just general drainage improvements, sort of an aging infrastructure. We've heard that, especially in Ward 1 and some of the older areas.
And finally, one of the things I've heard, and you let me know if this is something that can be done. I mean, there's some historic structures that are in Ward 1, Scipio Jones' home, just for example, some other pretty historical figures, and homes are abandoned and they need to be salvaged if possible, you know, fixed up. Can these funds be used for that type of targeted improvement for historical homes?
Let us look at it. One of the things, the city usually has to own this structure, like we own 1419 Park, in order to put money into a particular resident. We have not been able to get housing sort of as a public purpose, housing rehab as a public purpose, even though Mr. Carpenter made some progress on that last year. But we'll put it down and review it with the bond council.
Okay. Well, that's all I have at this point. I wish Antoine was here. He'd say something like, I want to reserve my right to come back. Is that what I should say? But anyway.
Duly noted. You've reserved your right to come back.
Okay, that's all I have to say. All right, thank you.
Is Director Richardson on? Okay. Director Webb?
Thank you. The number one thing I've heard from the neighborhoods I've heard from is drainage improvements. I think you remember that we still have a lot of requests from the last cycle that we were not able to get to. And then the second thing would be specific street improvements, not drainage, but resurfacing of a lot of the older streets. And the general thing that people seem to be most interested in are the parks improvements. That we had a neighborhood meeting last night and they were going to send their comments in, and so I won't reserve the right to come back today, but reserve the right to send in more things after today, if that's okay.
Okay. Director Peck?
Yep, thank you. I have a few things. Drainage and resurfacing are probably the number two items. Even though some of these problems have been addressed, I still have a lot of complaints, specifically in Leawood, Echo Valley, Walnut Valley, Pleasant Valley. Another concern is the Pankey community. There are a lot of flooding and drainage issues there. Even though Public Works did some great work back around Pankey Park that improved things greatly. Another concern with the Pankey community, and I know this is not something that we could probably address because it's a state highway, just the difficulty of members of that community simply crossing Highway 10 to get to Kroger or Walgreens. You know, the nearest light is at Sand Peck Road. And I think we've had some discussions, and Director Honeywell explained why it was probably not feasible to have a crosswalk, but maybe some way to slow traffic down to allow the members of that community to get across the street to go to the drugstore, the grocery store. Park improvements, always, we have 63 fabulous parks, but so many of them are in need of some TLC and some maintenance. I've heard a lot of people out in my area that just have fallen in love with Reservoir Park and the improvements that we've made there, but there's still some very simple and inexpensive things we could do, primarily just signage. You get in there off of Cantrell and you don't know where's disc golf, where's the softball court, just simple things. Also, Connor Park, which is a very small park just west of Sandpeck Road, but now it's become an important piece because of our bike trails at River Mountain and Two Rivers. Parking's pretty tight at Two Rivers. I think it's become one of our most beloved and popular parks. I know we've added parking. I think there's an opportunity to do some, and I think people from all over, not just the city, but the county, and enjoy walking and cycling and picnicking and kayaking in that area. At Connor Park specifically, there's a little fishing hole, and I've been there many times with my dogs, and kids are fishing, and I've had people from Pankey specifically ask, could we have some playground equipment there? Again, lots of parks issues. Another thing, and this is another traffic thing that I don't think is solvable, but I'm going to mention it. This is affects, I know Vice Mayor Hines gets a lot of complaints and questions about traffic on Henson and it being a speedway, and could we do something to slow down traffic on Henson? And then finally, the Reservoir Corridor and the Old Forge, Sanford Street area, which are the hot pockets in Ward 4. If we could do more dedicated patrolling of these areas. There's been a lot of activity and gunfire lately, especially in Sanford. And I have talked to Major King about these things, but I've got acquaintances that have left that neighborhood because they just don't feel safe and comfortable there any longer. One final thing, in the Walton Heights neighborhood, there's been a big increase in traffic there because of the trailheads that lead to the new world-class mountain bike trails. There are lots of people that walk in Walton Heights. And again, this is something else I've addressed with Director Honeywell, a way to slow traffic down at that trailhead, possibly provide more parking, and the citizens who live in Walton Heights would love some sidewalks there because they don't really have a place to walk, and it's a super popular area. And I will also do what Director Miller said and reserve my right to come back. Those are the main things that I've heard about.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Bruce, from an overall layout, I think keeping the ballot initiative as simple as we can with as few items is probably beneficial. I think the 2003, even though it was all approved, probably not the route, maybe not quite as simple as 2 items, but kind of somewhere in between, because I hear a lot about parks right now from some of my fellow board members. But in Ward 5, streets and drainage continue to be issues. Where streets go, new construction, Canis, east from Atkins, to the bridge there at Wellington Hills. And then the western terminus of Canis, once you get past Costco out to Stewart Road, where the county's building a new roundabout, needs to be widened and completed, as we're starting to get a lot of traffic coming in from Saline County on that road. And I'm hearing from folks who live in the city and in our ETJ that the traffic counts are getting high through that area. So I think that's kind of leftovers that we weren't able to finish on our sales tax money. The other thing, potentially, and this may or not be, but from an economic development standpoint, I know we've got capital needs at the tech park and at the port. Whether or not that meets the grade for this type of investment would be a question, and it might be something for different funds. But I think we maybe get our head up and look at what potentially we could happen there to keep feeding the 2 golden geese that we've got to keep laying golden eggs. One of the other things, and this kind of goes to what Director Peck's talking about, and this would be under streets and drainage, is more pedestrian tables. I've been traveling and I've noticed a lot of cities using and that where we've got pedestrian crossings. They're not asphalt speed humps. They're actually designed tables that allow pedestrians to cross and force traffic to slow down, but they will accommodate our fire apparatus. Something better than what we're doing with just a asphalt speed bump. But I think more integration of pedestrian crossings through our neighborhoods with these type tables may be beneficial. The communities I've been in that use them, they seem to be well thought out. They just don't throw them up in the middle of a street. But if you've got a potential area where you've got pedestrians crossing, they seem to almost always have one. So where the pedestrians and the cars meet, there's a slowdown, and that could be something that would be worked into our streets. But I think from my area, the biggest complaints I get from the neighborhoods are the amount of speeding. And unfortunately, as I point out to most of my constituents when I talk, it's usually your neighbors that are speeding. It's not cut through traffic. We have some pretty big neighborhoods in West Little Rock with 600-700 homes that, we've got my neighborhood and St. Charles neighborhood next to us. Those two combined neighborhoods are about 1,300 or 1,400 homes. That generates a lot of traffic just from your neighbors, and they tend to be the ones that are speeding to get home or get away from home. So, but I think anything we can do to improve the safety of our traffic through our neighborhoods would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Dr. Wright?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the bulk of the comments that I get from my constituents is infrastructure and drainage. They would like to see Bowman improved, Haynes completed from Gamble to Cooper Orbit, along with signalization as appropriate. Neighborhood streets are a major concern out here. I have a lot of streets that don't go all the way through, so they have a few houses on them, but they're having drainage problems and they're not complete. So in particular, 37th from Cobb Street down to Walker, where the city has purchased some lots to do infill affordable housing. We need to have the streets put in, like on Zion and 38th. We need to have Hicks Interurban Subdivision addressed. That's Hicks Inner, INNER Urban Subdivision, which is over behind the Northwest Precinct. A lot of new construction homes over there. None of the streets are in. I got ditches and drainage issues over there. And then I have small drainage issues throughout the ward. Then when it comes down from another major thoroughfare is Canis Road from Michael Drive down to Rodney Parham to get rid of that curb and make it walkable where people can walk. I have a lot of senior housing that's developed in that area. People want traffic calming throughout the neighborhoods, as I've heard some of my colleagues mention with the speed humps. And I serve on the, not serve on it, I've attended the infrastructure, priority infrastructure meetings, and I'm concerned because the metrics that they have developed do not address neighborhood streets. So I feel that there needs to be a separate allocation that strictly addresses neighborhood streets so that we can respond to our constituents who've been waiting for years to have their streets done. There is sidewalks throughout some of my neighborhoods that need to be addressed, that needs to be with neighborhood input as to where they want those. And when it comes down to parks, I like to see the pool at West Central be put in as was promised, that was in 2011 but not done. An upgrade to the ball fields that have not been upgraded since we accepted that donation of that park. And just the West Central master plan to be implemented, if at all possible, with these funds. I know it should be eligible, but I'd like that to be looked at. Let's see, Gavadrist, transfer. Oh, and regarding Dover Drive, we talked about either upgrading that street or either putting an alternative entrance egress from that area over there to help protect that neighborhood from traffic once that property begins to develop in and around them, over in Kensington. And I think I mentioned signalization at Cooper Orbit, Gamble to Cooper Orbit, Bowman Road, Canis Road, and Union Park, from the infrastructure around that park on Potter Street, from 36 and Potter down to 40th needs to be done. That was the next phase of that. And then 38th Street from Potter to Walker, which would put in the infrastructure around Union Park to allow that park to be utilized. Yeah. And I reserve my right to come back, but I would also recommend that we do what we did in 2011, that we have the ward meetings. I'd like at least 2 ward meetings in Ward 6, one at Northwest Precinct and one at West Central to gather input. And I'd also recommend we do a survey, online survey, so that we gather as much input as possible and we make sure that we publicize this so that residents don't come back and say they didn't know that we were gathering this input, they didn't know this, and they didn't know that. We tend to get that a lot, but I definitely want to have at least 2 ward meetings, and then once we gather input from them, staff will assess the project and put a dollar figure to it, and then we come back to and have a 3rd meeting in our ward so that people can hear what the cost to do what they would like to see done is, and then they can make a decision whether or not they would support us going forward with the bond. I reserve my right to come back. Thank you.
Director Wyrick. Yes, Director Phillips has started a trend.
He has? Well, let me just start out that I reserve my right to come back at 11. I'll start out with that instead of end it. In Ward 7, through the years, as we've had money, I've tried to improve the collector streets because those were important to me, getting people out of their neighborhoods and to work and to church and shopping and those kinds of things. So I would like to continue on with the improvement of the collector streets. Mableville West, we did a good job going from South Loop to the interstate, and we did a good job going from Mableville, Maine to the high school. We got a piece in there that we've not done, so that needs to be filled in. Vimy Ridge Road, our new Amazon Center is on Vimy Ridge Road, and as you go over the railroad track there, I'm not sure how those trucks make that turn out of there, but there is a deep ditch beside the railroad track that is hazardous to people and trucks. That's an issue, but the road needs to be improved from Interstate 30 to the county line. We've got a new apartment complex down there. I don't know how many units they're up to, but it's a lot. So, and there's a lot of traffic on that road, so that needs to be improved. Crystal Valley, David O'Dodd are small, skinny roads. We have a lot of traffic on those roads, and there's a lot of vacant land through there, so it's continuing to develop. There's a potential of a 515 lot subdivision on Crystal Valley, and that's going to really wreak havoc if we don't have some sort of street improvements there. I'm going to follow behind my friend and colleague in Ward 6. I'd like to see Canis improved down to Cooper Orbit. And then also Bowman Road needs to be improved from Colonel Glenn north. And I'm sure there's probably some other streets in my new area that Doris could outline that need some improvements, but I'm just not sure what those are right now. Another thing that is very important in Southwest Little Rock is we have drainage issues. I know we're going to take care of Yorkwood, which is Ken's now, with the ARPA funds. But we have some serious drainage issues in Ward 7. And I know along Stagecoach Road, there's somebody always in trouble along there. I know at one time there was a study done, and Ward 7 had more drainage potential projects than any other ward in the city. So I know they're out there, and those we've got to start addressing those. Someone mentioned parks and Otter Creek Park, and I'm assuming there's a master plan for each park. And I think we need to look at those master plans and see what pieces of those would fall under capital programs, and see what we can do to address those. We learned when we were doing the budget and the sales tax we tried to pass last year that we do not have enough fire trucks, and I'm not sure what the proposed number is up to now, but I think the fire chief said we needed 23 fire trucks from his testimony. So fire apparatus is important, I believe. And the last thing that I would say is to make sure that the police department has cars. I'm assuming those are capital.
They're not. Because of the rules around the life of the vehicle, which is about 5 to 7 years. Now, fire trucks are, because they last a whole lot longer, but yeah, police vehicles aren't going to be eligible.
I know we've been trying to trade those out and keep a good car going for our police officers. So that was on my mind. So those are just some thoughts that I had. Hopefully, we can make a difference with some of that. Are there any police department needs that are capital that we have not addressed in the past?
They are. We need a Southwest precinct needs a pretty major overhaul. Training needs a major overhaul. So yeah, there are some needs. And just so you know, while we're going through this, we'll also gather the departmental needs so we can sort of marry the two and move forward.
Okay. Doris, feel free to add to my list.
Well, I thought about Spring Valley Manor. They have some drainage issues out there that you're going to want to address. We started addressing them, but we didn't have enough money. So put Spring Valley Manor on that list to address some of their drainage issues.
Okay.
And since you called my name.
I did. Only for Ward 7, no, not for Ward 6.
No, this will help you too. We're talking about the police. We need to make to do what we had promised to do, which was create an actual precinct at that Pankey substation that's there. And the original plan had been to make that a substation, a precinct, and that would become Northwest. And then what's existing Northwest would become West Central Precinct. That way, the areas that need the assistance, which is currently Northwest and John Barrow with the high crime, that would have a dedicated precinct to it, which would become West Central.
Okay, I agree with you.
Please add that on there. West Central Precinct.
I agree. Okay, that's my list with the ability to add later.
Director Computers.
Thank you. Before I start, Director Phillips is somewhere out in Never Land and wants to make a comment, so.
We'll patch him in.
Okay, he just wanted me to mention that he was someplace out there. Well, I've taken a somewhat different tack to this, and I've sent y'all all today a proposal of trying to link what we're trying to do with redoing the 3/8 and sales tax. And if you look at, and I'm not the longest serving person here, I'm the third longest, but if you look at what we've done, we have underfunded streets, we have underfunded drainage, we have more parks and community centers than when I started, and the budget for parks and community centers is less than when I started. And so we come to this, and everybody has what they need in their ward. So, there's a lot of the roads that BJ just talked about that I'm not sure where they even are, but there's lots of needs in the city. So my thought is that, and I'll get with Tom and we'll write this up, is that we try to take care of fixing up our parks, community centers. We combine the fixing up with our parks and community centers with a way of taking care of the problems that we chronically had tried to address, that the mayor's been trying to address. We take care of our museums, and I think people want us to be good fiduciaries of what we're doing. And if we combine, and also, I don't think, Lance, that we can use the port or the tech park out of this money, but if we do it out of what I'm talking about, we can. You take that, and then, to me, we concentrate completely the money that we have on streets and drainage, and we take some part of that and we figure out a process where we take major roads that need to be fixed up. So finishing up Canis Road, we do a little here, a little there, but we never do the whole thing. So we take part of the money, and each time we say we're going to do this big project, this project, and then we divide the rest of it among wards. And as Director Wright said, you ask the people in the wards which will they want to do, and they've got this much money and this many projects, and you figure out how you prioritize them. The one homer issue that I have that I'd like y'all to consider is that the river market is 25 years old. And we're going to have to repurpose it, not repurpose it, redo it so it is pertinent to 20, 22, 3, 4, 5, and 6, because it's important to the city, it's important to tourism, it's important to all those sort of things. So if you take one project that I want to include on the list, it's that. But I would love you to look at this as asking for both things and trying to deal with, instead of saying, I've got this park here, if you take $4 million a year and you say, we're not going to build anything big in parks, but we're going to have $4 million a year, we're going to fix all the parks up over a 10-year period of time. And that's what we're supposed to do as fiduciaries. We're not supposed to be saying, we're going to fix up one park here, and we're going to let this other one go to hell over here, or not fix it, to me. So we need to go ahead and say we're going to either close them or be fiduciaries and take care of them. We have community centers. We're going to put a piece of sculpture this year, sculpture at the River Market at Dunbar Community Center. So I spent 3 hours going through there, and it is a great facility, but it needs to be upgraded. You got 2 great tennis courts. You've got a soccer field that needs to be fixed. You've got Dunbar Gardens that needs an entrance that doesn't look like, you know, that it was just put in yesterday. You've got a great field back there that we don't use. And we talk about how we're going to take care of long-term problems. Let's fix up our community centers. Let's spend money on programming there, which is what I'm talking about here. And then we concentrate on street and drainage and major streets in the city. So my list is shorter than everybody else's, but please look at this list I put out and we'll discuss it later on. And if anybody wants to call me, please do.
Director Phillips. He's not on. Director Adcock.
Yes.
He's here sometime.
Well, my first one is streets and speed bumps and drainage. But then also the community center. Southwest Community Center has not been repaired or updated since 1990 something, and we desperately need that. East Little Rock Community Center, it has 1 employee. It has gone down and down. We need to put some money into it. We have new housing out there. We have neighborhoods in Petaway that's being repaired and everything. We need to bring that community center up to where the others are. And this one we haven't talked about. We need a fence, a parking lot with a fence around it at the 12th Street Police Substation. They have been using one over at the church. They're no longer using it because it's not safe. So we need to go across the street from the precinct at 12th Street, and we need to put in a parking lot for the employees and put a fence around it. At Southwest, we have a parking lot, but it is not fenced, and it's not safe sometimes for our police officers to go out into that parking lot late at night. So those are my things. Animal Village is another thing. We have not updated the Animal Village since it was built. We need some new kennels. The dogs being confined so much during the pandemic, the kennels have got large holes in them, and we need to update the Animal Village and the kennels. So the community centers, streets and drainage, and Animal Village are mine.
Everyone, Director Phillips is going to, due to an issue, he's going to visit at another time. That's the reason why he wasn't able to come on. Mr. Moore, could you address Director Compuris? He mentioned about whether or not you can use capital expenditures for the port and some other things?
Really going to have to, I mean, the general rule of thumb is if the city owns it, we can, put resources into it. Just like you mentioned the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts. So the city owns the port. So I don't think that that would be an issue. On the tech part, we used the sales tax dollars, 2012 sales tax dollars to fund that, I think, at $22 million. So that's just something that the bond council would have to give us, in working with the city attorney, give us their thoughts on how to proceed with that, if that's one of the items that is on the list. So at this point, I mean, we can divide these up and put these in different categories and send those out on Friday, but I am going to need some direction at some point soon. As I mentioned, we're limited to when you can have special elections during a general election year. We've already missed February. Obviously, the next one would be the primary, and then August the 8th, and then the general election. When looking at the calendar and everything that's going on, I was really focused on that August the 8th date as far as calling or you have to call it at least 70 days before the election. And in fact, the county would like even more time than that. So even though we're thinking down the line, we'll soon be into March, and we really have to do this by May. And I can't remember the exact date, but I think it's pretty early May. So I know Director Pierce has outlined a proposal, and I don't know, Director Pierce, what you feel like are next steps. You said we can discuss it later, but my only point on that is we can't tarry too long on how we're going to try to package and move this forward.
Director Camilleras?
I would love to sit down and talk with you and coordinate the two activities together to make this a unified project moving forward. And whenever you want to do it, I'm ready to do it.
So, Mr. Moore, you and I will visit and we'll work with members of the board to determine a path forward. Director Webb?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I haven't had a chance to read Director Campuris's proposal yet, and somebody just sent me a message and said, why aren't y'all talking about War Memorial? And I didn't think it was necessary. I mean, a lot of people talked about parks, and I think that hopefully it would go without saying, depending on what we do moving forward, that obviously War Memorial would be an important part of park renovation.
And Director Webb, you and I have had many conversations about War Memorial, just like Director Warwick and I have had many conversations about Hyman Park. I really wanted to just take time to listen to members of the board. There are clearly some things that I think, what I've heard from members of the board that needs to be included as it relates to capital projects that will be shared. War Memorial, Hyman Park are part of that process. Strategic investments from an infrastructure standpoint that truly goes toward how do we address some of the major things. We've had both Director Warwick and Director Wright have been very involved in our infrastructure study group that really shows us where we need to pinpoint and not piecemeal. And so they've been working on that really now, I dare say, a year and a half. And so I believe that information should be finalized soon in regards to that kind of study group work. So there are other big picture items. We just wanted to, the manager and I wanted just to listen to the individual board members first before we kind of shared other big picture items. We wanted to listen and see if there was any duplication of efforts. But clearly, let me stress again, War Memorial Park, Hyman Park, strategic infrastructure investments, our community center capital fund that we referenced before, to really bring more things to that, all of which are capital funds that we can use, again, more land for the port to do more development, which we own and tie to economic development. So I was trying to dutifully not say much today, but just wanted to make sure I took time to listen. The Office of Executive Administration wanted to take time to listen to get the list from the members of the board, but also we'll be adding to the big picture items.
Thank you.
Mayor, my hand's up.
Director Wright, I'm sorry.
I want to add a word of caution here. We need this community residents' input into this. We got buy-in from our constituents in 2011. That's how we were able to pass this. And whereas I understand the wish list and the dream list for War Memorial and Hyman and all these other things, my constituents they want their streets fixed. They feel like that impacts their quality of life and what their property is worth. And I don't want us to take our eyes off of that by conflating too many things into this. We need to have the infrastructure in our neighborhoods to support stabilization of our neighborhoods. And that's where I am with this thing. I don't want us to put together something so grand that people are like, oh no, that's too much. I don't want to pay that. We having high inflation. Gas is over $3 a gallon. We have to think about people's pocketbooks. And I for one am thinking about that. And I know that streets, curb, gutter, sidewalks, people will support that. But when you start getting too far off into the weeds, wish lists and dream lists, that I just don't think that, from what I've heard from my constituents, that's just not going to fly right now.
We totally agree with you, Director Wright. That's why we think it's imperative. Mr. Moore and I have discussed with the 3 mills, it's not adding to anything. And you are totally correct. And that's the reason why we wanted to take the time to listen to you and members of the board to get the things that your constituents would like within your respective wards. It will be focused on the streets, the drainage, the infrastructure. But as Mr. Moore shared, there's opportunity because it's a bond versus a tax that, depending on how long you extend it, you can get a few more dollars as well. But it will have a central focus on infrastructure, as you shared.
Thank you.
Director Wyatt.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to echo Director Wright's sentiments on this issue. We tried to pass the sales tax last year, and it failed. And I'm very concerned about whether or not we can get a millage extension and a 3/8 cent sales tax. I'm afraid that the train has left the station on the sales tax. When you start looking at the cost of food, the cost of gas, utilities, I had an email today where a man couldn't pay his electricity bill, and they finally cut him off, and now he didn't have the money to pay the turn-on fee or to pay the electricity bill. So people are struggling to make ends meet. When you look at the franchise taxes that are paid on your utilities, there's a lot of money that's already coming from individuals to the city coffers. I brought up parks because others had brought up parks, and I obviously have some in Southwest Little Rock that need improvements. I'm glad you mentioned Hyman because it is an iconic park and it needs some work. But when it comes to selling millage or sales tax or whatever it is, people will support streets, drainage, police, and fire. And they will support some dollars to parks. That's why I said, look at the plans that you have that have already been set up for parks and see if there's pieces in there that can be done with capital improvement. But I'm not thinking that's going to be a big amount of dollars to get that done. So I'm just concerned about throwing too much at everybody at one time and them just saying no, no, no. And then we have no money for drainage, no money for streets, no money for fire trucks. I mean, it's over. So I think we have to be very careful when we start trying to combine a bunch of increases at this point. We could have done a 3/8 at the end of last year after the sales tax failed, but there's been a lot of things that have changed so far in these 2 months in January and since the sales tax failed from an economic situation. So I just think we need to be careful when we start trying to throw too much out there and ask for money. I know these are all desires of people. I know they sound good, but I think we need to look at what the people will really need at this point and leave some of the fluff for another time. Thank you.
And Director Wyrick, the Office of Executive Administration agrees with you. We are not proposing a 3/8 cent sales tax before you. We're here today in regards to the 3 mil bonds. If a 3/8 cent sales tax is proposed, that'll be before the board to vote upon to add. The only thing that the Office of Executive Administration is proposing is the 3 mil bond. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah, well, it sounds like we might be trying to change the direction a little bit. So I just wanted to state where I was on the issue, and I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I just want to reiterate, we're not changing the direction now. If the direction's changed, that'll be because the board voted to change the direction.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Mr. Moore?
I don't have anything else, Mayor. Like I said, we'll put these in categories. And as the mayor mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, there are some departmental needs that we need to address that we committed to in the first sales tax that we weren't able to address. So we'll be bringing some of those ideas back. But I think very clearly streets drainage, public safety, and some parks are sort of what I heard today. And then, of course, Director Compuris has his list. And so we'll put everything in categories, and hopefully we can have another workshop at our next agenda meeting.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moore. Again, just thank you for everyone, their time and attention to share these comments as we work to build a 3 mil bond package together with the board that's strategically focused on streets, drainage, overall infrastructure, parks improvements, things that we need to do to really truly build for our city's future from a foundationary standpoint. And so just thank everyone for your time and your attention. We'll continue to have more sessions. Also, Director Wright, we agree we'll have public sessions. As we're coming out of COVID, we'll be having more at a time certain when we get ready to work towards this. I'm sure we'll have those town hall meetings that you referenced, both to share the beginning and then after work is done to come back before anything's put in any type of final writing. We will work to get that done as best as possible within the time frame. Of course, Mr. Moore shared that if we so choose to move forward with 3 mills, we need to do it in a timing that meets the Pulaski County Circuit Clerk. I believe it's 70 days. They really wanted to be, if it's up to them, probably 90 days, but we do have that 70-day window. So we definitely concur with you there as well for the 3 mil bond from that standpoint. That being said, members of the board, we'll take this early retrieve. Have a great day.